Greetings gamers, Agent SN, and welcome to the Gaming Arena, our new series where we compare and contrast two games or two game series to decide which one is on top. And today we have The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is a game that needs no introduction on this channel, and then we have MiHoYo's open world action RPG, Genshin Impact. These are two games that are very similar, but they get compared heavily online. But which game is better? Which game is objectively superior? Well, today we're about to take a look at that. So let's get started. Well, actually not yet, because now let's look at the categories before we do. In 3, 2, 1. Alright, so here's the categories. The categories for this video are characters, gameplay, story, music, content, world, and impact, or shall I say Genshin Impact. And yeah, because the pun at the end. Anyway, though. Let's get started with this battle in 3, 2, 1. Round 1, characters. Alright, so here is the cast for Breath of the Wild's characters. We have Link, Calamity Ganon, Zelda, Daruk, Midfa, Urbosa, Revali, King Rome, and Impa. This is overall a very solid cast, and each have a lot of personality and some good involvement within the game's great story in it, which is definitely really good. I mean, of course, we've seen Link, Ganon, and Zelda before, and Impa, of course. We're gonna see them even more in a more futuristic and post-apocalyptic version of Hyrule, which is really nice. So yeah, and honestly, I think Breath of the Wild, I think Breath of the Wild by far has one of the most, it has one of the best portrayals of Link and Zelda, honestly. And the 4 champions, which are Daruk, Midfa, Urbosa, and Revali, are all really cool. So yeah, and the lore behind them in Age of Calamity is also really interesting too. So yeah. So that out of the way, let's now talk about Genshin Impact's character cast. Alright, now for Genshin, I mean, it has a huge character cast. I mean, if you go here on the Genshin wiki, which I'm on, there is a freaking huge amount of characters you can have. I mean, you have Mona, Kaya, Keking, and yeah, Raiden. Yeah, I mean, there's really a bazillion characters in this that's too hard to even count. But what about them? Well, let's talk about that in just a minute. Now about the main character though, so for the main character, you either in Genshin Impact, you either play as a boy or a girl, which respectively are actually canonically named Aether and Lumine. So yeah, each protagonist is very cool, honestly. And yeah, I mean, they're not as good as Link, for sure, but they are some pretty good characters, for sure. But one of them gets kidnapped by some mysterious goddess or whatever. Now we'll get into the story yet, but the protagonist is pretty cool, but I think Link has more personality, honestly, despite both the Genshin protagonist and Link being silent protagonists. They're still pretty good. But what about their partner exactly? Well, they're accompanied by this fairy creature named Paimon, and Paimon is basically like Navi from The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. So yeah, she talks in a very fairy-like voice and is basically your companion. She's pretty good, honestly, and sometimes she can be better than Link's fairies that he's been companioned with in the Zelda games, but she's not as good as the likes of Midna or Fi, even though this video is only comparing this game to Breath of the Wild. But now in terms of the other characters you encounter, Alright, so throughout the game's story, and throughout the game's gacha system that we'll talk about soon, you'll encounter more characters. Each of them has some really good personalities to them, which is very good for a game that has a lot of story. However, I do think that Link, Zelda, and the four champions have a lot more personality, so yeah. But each of the Genshin characters, they also have some very good uniqueness to them, and yeah, which is pretty good. But I do think that I give the edge over to Breath of the Wild. And the point here goes to Breath of the Wild. Both games have a very solid and interesting cast. They each give details and stuff about more of the story, but Breath of the Wild has more lore with each character. So yeah, and the four champions are honestly more interesting than the whole cast in Genshin. So yeah. But Genshin has some very good characters too, I can say that. And all of them are pretty cool, but yeah. The Breath of the Wild cast is much more interesting in my opinion, so I'm giving the point to Breath of the Wild. Round 2, Gameplay. Breath of the Wild is a very big evolution for the Zelda series, as I brought the series in a completely different but better and new path. The game now puts you in a gigantic, and when I say that, I mean like gigantic open world, and with it, there's so much to do here. I mean, there's so many weapons to encounter, including swords, shields, bows, and everything. Horses to encounter, and you go around completing shrines and the 4 divine beasts. And in this game has a lot of freedom, like you can basically do anything you want, and basically in any order. Like there's no specific order for what you can do. So yeah. And you can actually beat the final boss at any time, basically. But everything here is just jam-packed with expansive gameplay, with you exploring the wild, riding horses, and fighting enemies with a bunch of weapons, and basically, and yeah. Now, what about the battle system? Well, the combat in this, like I said, you have a bunch of different weapons to use, but you also have these runes, like Magnesis, Stasis, Cryonis, and whatever the bomb one was called, I forgot. And yeah, and they're used heavily on puzzles during shrines. So yeah, and yeah. So basically how the combat goes. So the battle system plays like that. And as usual, action combat. I mean, that's expected, I guess, for an action-adventure game. But now let's see how Genshin matches up. So Genshin plays very, very similar to Breath of the Wild. And the gameplay is super similar, with you exploring a gigantic world that also gets expanded regularly. We're going to talk about that later in the video. But the big difference too between these two games is that, unlike Breath of the Wild, Genshin Impact is an RPG. So it also is an RPG. So yeah. But yeah, now unlike Breath of the Wild, where it's only one character, with Genshin you play as 4 characters at a time. Like I said, there's a huge cast of characters. Now in some ways, the gameplay in Genshin does get a bit better than Breath of the Wild, besides one big weakness we're going to talk about in a minute. But yeah, you complete quests and stuff, and the game focuses heavily on quests. So yeah. And and explore we explore small dungeons that are similar to shrines too, and each character has their own ability that's sometimes required to proceed through them, and yeah. Each character has their own special gimmick with it, basically. So, yeah. Alright, so Genshin Impact plays very good, and the quests are fun to explore and stuff, and exploring the giant world of Teyvat is pretty good, and the battles play very good. However, there's two big weaknesses I have with the gameplay. One of which is the fact that, because Genshin is a free-to-play, online-only game, of course there's going to be microtransactions that we'll talk about in a minute. But before that, one weakness I have is the fact that they have to grind a lot to get your adventure rank up. Anyway, though, one big weakness I have is the pay-to-win, because this game focuses heavily on microtransactions because it's a free-to-play game. But how do you do it? Well, you do it through gacha system. Yeah, you have to use these wishes using these gems, and you have to spend your currency, which is Primogems, to get weapons and characters. So if you want to grind all day, to get Mona or Keking or whatever, well, good luck spending all your Primogems or whatever. So yeah, this can get very annoying and very repetitive and very tedious. I can't deny that. I guess it's expected for a game that's free to play, but still, it's very annoying, honestly. So yes, the point goes to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I have to give the point to it, mostly because the gameplay feels, well, it feels more fresh, I guess, considering that Genshin Impact basically stole its gameplay, I guess, but made it pay to win with gacha. I mean, Genshin Impact, it plays very well, but the gacha is a big turnoff. So for that reason, I'm giving it to Breath of the Wild. But both games play very well, despite Genshin having a handful of issues regarding the gacha system and the adventure rank system. But Genshin Impact is online, so I guess that makes sense. Well, Breath of the Wild is a completely offline game that doesn't take use of internet at all. But so yeah. And Breath of the Wild's gameplay just feels more interesting, and honestly has the better combat, although I do like the fact that Genshin has 4 characters at a time. But yeah. But I'm going to point to Breath of the Wild. Round 3, Story. So for Breath of the Wild story, it focuses on Link waking up in a post-apocalyptic version of Hyrule 100 years later after falling asleep, and has been invaded by Calamity Ganon, and has turned Hyrule into a huge amount of big, vast fields and stuff. So yeah, and then Link must restore Hyrule and save it by going around the shrines and also fighting divine beasts. Well, I guess going inside them and fighting forms of Ganon in them with the 4 champions in them. Overall, the story is very good, and it definitely has a great narrative to it. And yeah. But let's move on to the Genshin story. So like I said earlier, Genshin focuses on a boy or a girl who has fallen from another world and must save their sibling. And yeah, but and the sibling is kidnapped by some evil goddess. So you must explore the massive world of Teyvat to try to save him or her. So with it, you'll be encountering a bunch of different characters and completing quests, obviously, and now I haven't finished the story, so I can't really tell you everything, but Paimon is with you, and throughout it as your companion, and overall the story has a lot of personality to it, but the story has way more to it too. And the thing is, Genshin gets updated because it is a live service game. Breath of the Wild got it got 2 expansions. The story ended with the second DLC, but Genshin Impact gets updated. Genshin gets updated all the time for a new story and stuff. And overall, I think this game overall has a superior story to Breath of the Wild. So yes, the point goes here to Genshin Impact. Overall, the story has way more to it because the story gets updated with even more characters with it and more narrative with it. And yeah, and like I said, well, I haven't finished the story in Genshin Impact, so I can't tell you everything. But I have beaten the story of Breath of the Wild. But overall, from what I've researched and stuff, and from what I've seen, I think Genshin overall has a superior story because it has more interesting stuff to it, and it's much bigger and it has more with it. So yeah, so for that reason, I'm giving the point here to Genshin. Round 4, music. Both games have very solid soundtracks, but which one is specifically superior? Well, let's take a look, starting off with Breath of the Wild soundtrack. So yeah, Breath of the Wild has some very solid tunes, and some absolute bangers too. But what about Genshin's OST? Let's see how that matches up. Alright, the point here goes to Genshin Impact. So yeah, I'm giving the point to Genshin because, I mean, it has a much more relaxing OST. I mean, both games have a great OST, but Genshin overall has a better one. I mean, it feels nice, feels relaxed. I mean, Breath of the Wild does too. I do think that Genshin has a much better OST overall. So yeah. But now let's go on to the next category and see which and let's see if these last 3 rounds will break this tie and see which one will win. Round 5, content. Alright, so for this next one, I don't think I even need to explain it because here's the thing. Like I said earlier, Breath of the Wild is an offline single-player game, while Genshin is an online live service game. So because live service, new content gets added over time. This game is filled with probably thousands of hours if you want to do everything. I mean, this game is full of stuff. And it actually has more than Breath of the Wild does. I mean, and both games are jam-packed with content, I mean. But I don't think I need to explain this because, I mean, Genshin has even more. Because it is a live service game that gets new content added regularly. So, yeah. Of course, of course, Genshin wins for this round because it's a live service game, so it gets content added regularly. And Breath of the Wild is offline, and it only got 2 new things. Well, it only got 2 waves of content added because of additional $20 DLC. While with Genshin, it has free content updates regularly coming, so yeah. So obviously Genshin wins for this round. Alright, now we're on to the last 2 rounds. Let's see if Breath of the Wild will take the victory or if Genshin will take it. Round 5, World. Alright, so Genshin is set in the world of Teyvat, which is basically just a massive world, I guess, I've already talked about already in this video. So yeah, and now the one thing it does better than Breath of the Wild is the fact that it's more alive, because Breath of the Wild is post-apocalyptic. So most of Hyrule got destroyed before the events of the game. Now, there's one thing that that Genshin does better than Breath of the Wild is the fact that the world feels more alive and more stuff going on. However, let's see how Breath of the Wild holds up against it. Alright, despite Genshin being set in a more alive world, basically, that has more stuff going on with it, I have to give the edge here to Breath of the Wild, mainly because, although it is more systematic, it also has better lore overall. I think the lore of Hyrule gets a little bit more interesting than Teyvat overall. So yeah, and despite Genshin having a better story, Breath of the Wild has a much more interesting world with it, and more better stuff going on, and so yeah, so yeah, I gotta give it to Breath of the Wild here. Alright, I give the point here to Breath of the Wild. I mean, both games have a great world going on overall. However, I think despite Breath of the Wild's post-apocalyptic setting, I do think that just has more interesting lore regarding its world. So yeah, and I think Calamity Ganon is overall a better villain than that goddess that kidnapped the sibling of whatever character you choose to play as. But for here, I'm giving the point to Breath of the Wild. Alright, now let's see which one will take the lead. Well, will be a tie, or will Breath of the Wild officially take a lead? Well, let's go over to the next category. Round 5, Impact, or shall I say, Genshin Impact. Ha! Yes, I had to throw in that pun there, but let's just get on with this final round. Alright, for this next one, I mean, it's no contest. Breath of the Wild obviously wins because here's the thing. I mean, here's the thing. Both games are very iconic. Both games have had huge popularity. However, Breath of the Wild automatically gets the win here because it is literally cited by many people, including me, as one of the greatest games of all time. Not only is this game one of my personal favorite games of all time, but it's also many others too. Now Genshin gets very good reviews and all too, but Breath of the Wild gets better reviews, so yeah. And but Genshin is still very good overall, but Breath of the Wild got way more impact with it. So yeah, because everything. Genshin is hugely popular too, but it's not cited as one of the greatest games of all time by many critics like Breath of the Wild is. So yeah. Alright, with a score of 5-3, the winner of the first episode of the Gaming Arena is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. It wins from 5-3, so yeah. Breath of the Wild overall is a better game than Genshin Impact, but both games are very good and very solid, and definitely games I would recommend. So yeah. Anyway, that's it for this. That's it for this episode of the Gaming Arena, and I will see you guys next time for next video. Agent S out.